Welcome to another episode of In the Deep with Dave. Today I'm joined virtually by a lady called Samantha Hearne. I will let her introduce herself, a little bit about Samantha and what she does. So over to you, Sam, if you could just introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Sam and I live in Windsor. So I'm maybe about 10 minutes from Windsor Castle.
Nice.
And not bad. And I'm a business coach and mentor for female entrepreneurs who want to actually build an engaged, that's the key word, an engaged community, using social media in an organic way to then create and scale their business. So I do a lot on personal branding, social media, business strategy, how to show up online really and connect with your audience.
Yeah.
So that's what I do.
So, and that's key there. I think the engagement part of that, because I think there's been a lot of, and I see a lot of people on Instagram and social media where they've got 40, 50, 60, 70,000 followers, but no engagement on any of their posts. I think there was a way back when you could buy followers and all kinds of different things on Instagram. So how is it that you target your followers or your people to be engaged? Where do you start with that?
Content. So I've built my business on organic strategy. So I've never used paid advertising, which is a big thing that a big USP. I mean, now I am, because I'm scaling from multiple 6 to 7 figures. So of course I need to have advertising and funnels and systems in place to be able to expand the business. But when I first was able to leave my full-time teaching job, make my first 6 figures, scale my business, it was all organic. So I'm really passionate about this because I think it's important that people also understand that it's not about numbers. It's never about numbers. It's about engagement. I have friends that have, retired their husbands, traveled the world, and they have like 4,000 followers. So it's definitely about engagement. So I would say there's 2 main things. One is content. So how are you showing up online, and how are you focusing on what they want? So I think that's the big thing. A lot of the time we share what we think we want, but we forget that we're 1, 2, 3 steps ahead of where our community is, and sometimes that can create a level of detachment. So the first thing is making sure that your content is focused around what they really need, and if that is stripping it back a little bit, going a little bit back to basics, I think that's really important. And the second thing is video. So whether that is going live frequently, having a group, having somewhere that you can build a community that builds engagement. So the sooner you can show up and be visible, people can connect with your personality. You can start to see who's joining you on a more regular basis. You can get that consistency. And I think it allows people to then become part of something with you. So I would say definitely content and video.
Great. So where did it all begin for you then? Where did it all begin on this coaching journey and you starting your multi 6, 7 figure business?
So I was a secondary school teacher. So I worked in a secondary school for 10 years. I was an assistant head teacher, and I was in charge of the pastoral. So I was a head of year for 8 of those 10. And I did all the way from year 7 all the way up to sixth form. So I spent 3 years as head of year 12, year 13 and year 12. I loved teaching, and I got to a point where, to not go too much into my experience, my personal journey, but anxiety was a really, really big part of my teenage years. My dad died unexpectedly when I was young. My mum and dad didn't live together. They separated, so we lived with our dad. My mum then moved to Jamaica when I was 20. So before I was even a teacher, I was exposed to quite a lot of rejection, abandonment, anxiety. So I then took that into teaching, and I was super passionate about it. And then I just got to a point where I worked in the number 1 state school in the south of England. So pressure was really high, expectations were high, grades were really high. So it was a really, really high status and high profile job, and 10-hour days, no overtime, no bonuses, and it's a tough gig being a teacher.
It is. Take me hat off to any teachers out there, and especially after homeschooling my children for the last 6, 7 weeks. I'll never say anything bad about a teacher again.
Do you know what? And I think that's a big thing, because I was a head of year as well, all I dealt with was the parents. There was a lot of my conversations were never positive. You know, I was kind of the front line of defense. And it does take its toll, you know, when you're doing your best by the children and, you know, you really, really care. And to then have, you know, meetings and things like that, it definitely did. I just got to a point where I thought, I don't know if I can do this till I retire, you know, especially in a school like this, because then I was in a situation where I was confronted with the choice. If I leave that school, I would only be going to a lesser quality. And I thought, do I then want to go to a school where behaviour is not as good, grades aren't as good, expectations aren't as good, the culture's not as good, and make it harder for myself? No. So I thought, why not see how I can put everything I learned in teaching, all of my experiences with anxiety and mental health together. So I started my first business, which was as an anxiety coach. I self-published a book around anxiety, and I spoke on a lot of stages around mental health, and I kind of really built my business and personal brand in my first business that way. And I was still teaching full time. And then what happened was a lot of my followers then wanted to know how I'd done it. How was I able to create a successful online business and still work, which the majority of people do at the beginning. You know, we aren't in a situation where we've got mortgages, we've got families, expectations. So I then transitioned into what I do now, which is teaching people how to use social media to build a community and a personal brand to grow a business. So not the shortest answer, but that's kind of a bit of a succinct.
Good that. And I think that's, you know, we've had some great people on talking about different overcoming anxiety, and what were your top tips? So what were you going around when you were doing the talks on the anxiety? What were your top tips? Because I think a lot of people's anxiety right now will be through the roof. So it's, you know, probably now's the perfect time to try and help people. Where would you start with trying to help people on that?
It's really hard without having context. So a big part of my business was I needed to, so there's so much more than anxiety, such a huge umbrella, and there's so many different triggers, so many different circumstances that can impact people, and so many different strategies based on the experience that they've had or are having. But I think the most important thing that I would say, because I still do a lot of work in schools now with anxiety and working with teenagers and training parents and staff, I think the one thing that I would say, which is probably going to be able to be relevant and resonate with anybody without knowing, you know, the listeners and what they're going through, anxiety is something that our brains associate with negativity. So instinctively, if you say the word happy, we associate positively with that. Fear, we associate negatively. Anxiety. So it's already important for everybody to acknowledge that the word anxiety has a negative connotation. So it's always easier to focus on the problem when you're dealing with a word and an emotion that instinctively makes you focus on the negatives. So what I would say is you need to start trying to redirect that energy. You need to start redirecting it, because anxiety is just a word, an explanation. So in your household, and this is something that we used to do, we wouldn't use that word anymore. So that's the most important thing. You know, you can call how you're feeling anything. You know, you can say that you feel pink. You know, you can say that you feel elephants. You know, it completely, it detaches from the impact and that negative correlation we have with the word. So if anybody, and especially if you are listening to this and you have a loved one that experiences anxiety and really struggles with that, it's a great way to start new conversations, because the more you tell someone, are you feeling anxious? How do you feel now? And they have to explain it, the more negativity around the emotion is being expressed. So that would be my top tip. Just try and detach so much from the word and the meaning that we instinctively give it, and start to give it a new meaning in your social circles and the people that you love. Because I'd say that's where I'd start.
Great. So moving on then, so was that your first business, you said? So you were going around and educating, and then you moved into the coaching other people to grow their business online. So what are the first steps? Because I think now is a great time if you want to grow your business online. Now is a great time to start. One of my businesses, we've transformed since you know, lockdown, and we've really probably tripled our turnover in the last 2 months than where we were previously, just because we're accessing more people. More people have won online and sitting at home on their smartphones. What would your kind of first bit of advice be for people starting a business online and wanting to move online?
Create a community. number one. Don't worry about the colors, the logo, the website, email marketing. All of that is important, of course, but if you have no one to look at all this stuff, it's not creating the impact you want. So the number one thing I tell anyone to do is start building a community. Before you have anything to sell, before you know what your packages will look like, you need to speak to your people. You need to understand them. They need to understand you. You need to build relationships. You need to understand what it is they need from you and who you attract. So I always would start with building an online presence. And in fact, I would actually say, I wouldn't advise people to start building out coaching packages or products or services or whatever it is that they're looking to do in their business until they know who they're serving. Because otherwise you could spend that 6 months, 3 months building something epic, but in that 6 months, we haven't built anyone that's going to buy it. So I think that community has to be, that is the paramount message that I tell everybody, to start getting yourself visible.
And how does somebody build a community then? What because I think that would be quite alien to people in terms of building a community. Where would they even start to do that?
Choose a platform and get visible on that platform. So it could be any platform, it could be on YouTube, podcasts. It could be, usually it's Instagram or Facebook. They're the two predominant ones people would start on, and they are actually a really good place to start, and start being consistent and visible. Because the other thing that's really important, so that could be posting every day a photo with a caption. It could be doing stories. It could be doing weekly lives. But something else that holds a lot of people back is, well, I don't have any followers, so I won't show up until I have followers. You have to be showing up for the business that you're building, not the business you currently have. So if you're showing up, if you're not going to show up until you have, say, 500 followers, what are those 499 people doing until that 500th person hits that milestone? So when you choose a platform, choose that platform, and then you show up irrespective of what everyone else is doing with your message, your passion, what you want to share. And you'll find you navigate your way through, because you find your voice, you find your confidence, and that can only come, I say this all the time, but from action comes clarity. So you might take action and then think, oh, I don't really like that color, or I don't like this type of photo. Great, you've learned something, now you can refine it. So the more you act, the clearer you become, and the more refined and confident you are in your business. But the cycle continues where if you don't act, you continue to feel unsure, uncertain, or overwhelmed, and then nothing happens. So choose one platform, show up, and just experiment and just enjoy sharing your message. And from that place, clarity will come.
On the wall of Facebook, there's a quote that says, done is better than perfect.
100%.
And that is on the wall of Facebook in their headquarters in America. Done is better than perfect. And I think that's right. You're right. You can put the content out, and as you get going, you can think, oh, well, I found a better way of doing that. And you will always refine your practices and processes, because you'll evaluate what you're doing. But if you're not doing anything, you've got nothing to evaluate, nothing to get better. Lives, I can do podcasts, I can talk to people all day, but talking to yourself in a phone, in a laptop, is the hardest thing. And I think once you start nailing that and doing that, you'll get better and better, and having them topics listed about what you want to talk about or what you want to go through. Because you need to get your personality across to people. That people buy from people, don't they?
Totally. And also as well, everybody starts from zero. So it's so easy to look and find someone that has, an audience of 50,000 Instagram followers. Good for them. They've probably worked tirelessly to create that, but they would have started at zero too. So you just need to find people that are closer to where you are to use as your aspiration, because that can be really hard when you're doing your first Facebook Live and you're following people like Brendan Burchard. They've been doing it for years, whereas if you find someone that's maybe been doing it 6 months to a year, they're going to be so much closer to where you're looking to go. So give yourself that as well. Everybody has to start, and there's always more to learn. But if you never start, you're never going to get yourself off the blocks. I totally agree.
And I think that is a key piece of advice there, because I remember watching Gary Vaynerchuk, and he talks about all the time where he was on YouTube, he was on Twitter talking about wine, and nobody was watching. And now he's, millions of followers, millions of views every post he puts out, and he's really kicked on. But people look at Gary Vee and think, oh, well, I'm never going to be like Gary Vee. Well, no, you're not going to be like Gary Vee overnight, and you may never ever be like Gary Vee. He's such, far ahead of everyone. But you're right. If you pick somebody with 500, 1,000 followers, start looking what they're doing. Even if you start looking and targeting their followers, that's a big thing for me. Is if you look at someone with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7,000 followers, and you look who's following them, you start following, commenting, being social with these people. So I think people lose the aspect of social media. They don't comment, they don't reply to comments, they get comments or likes, and they don't say a thank you. And I think people lose that kind of sight, don't they?
Yeah, totally. I think that's so important. You can't, an engaged community works both ways. I completely agree.
So the engaged communities are the one bit of advice. Where would they go from there?
Once you have a community, then it's about asking questions. So you need to then learn about them. What do they need? What do they enjoy? Where are they? So you have, I do this weekly. So I actually do questions weekly, whether it's in polls or on a live. I always like to find out where my community are at. And I think that then inspires you to create what they need, whether that is a PDF, whether it's a course, whether it's a live, a tutorial, or webinar. It's really important that once they are engaged, you continually make sure that you're temperature gauging where they are. What do they need from you, and how can you be of service to them? And also, how do they know they're valued? That's really important. They need to feel valued and like their questions are being heard and their questions are being answered. And that's going to also be the reason that your followers and your clients come back and you have a good retention, because people know that you are going to act on what they tell you. So my next thing would be ask questions.
Great. And so you're asking the questions, and how do people identify their audience? How do they know they're attracting the right audience? How do you do that?
Usually, most of the time, it's where they were 2, 3, 5 years ago. So usually you want to help people do something that you've done or overcome, because that's what you're passionate about. So for example, if you want to work with women going through a divorce and empowering them to live their life on their own, usually that would have been you 3 or 4 years ago when you were going through that experience. So it could be that you want to help new mums, and it's because you've been a new mum. I refer more to females, sorry, because my audience is 90% women. But it could be that you want to learn and you want to teach people how to become confident on camera, because there is a time that you weren't and now you are, and your business has exploded. So I'd always just say, what your passion and who you want to serve now usually has a direct link to where you were before things started to change. And that is where your ideal clients are, where you were this time ago.
Who are your ideal clients, and who do you look for? Who do you target and get the majority of business from?
Female entrepreneurs that want to grow their business using social media. So which is exactly what I was in both businesses, really. So I work with action-taking women who are go-getters, because that's what I am. I never procrastinated. I always did what I had to do. I'm not I've never been one to kind of make excuses or hold myself back. I'd always kind of go into things, sometimes too quickly, but quite fearlessly. So my clients usually have this big tenacious attitude, but they're struggling to create the success from that, or they're struggling to find their feet in that space. And I think that's definitely, when I started, I had all these big passions, but it's, how do you use that in the right way? How do you really put that into a positive, rather than kind of find yourself too sporadic and then nothing happens? So my clients are female entrepreneurs who want to build a business based on their personal brand, their message, and their community, and making sure that they can do that with simple strategies. They don't have to overwhelm themselves.
Great. And that's an interesting point, that you're a big action taker. Is that something you've always been, or is that something you've had to train? What do you think? Because I think a lot of people's reasons for not getting where they want to be is they don't take action.
Yeah.
You don't do what they say. They'll do all of the training. They'll pay all of the coaches. They'll have this dream, but they never get to where they want to be.
Yeah, that's
And
never
I
been.
think,
I've always taken action, even as a kid. I've always been an action taker, always. I think definitely the experiences I had at a young age, you know, I've been through things that people in their 40s haven't experienced, and I was 14. So I think
yeah,
not only did I have to grow up really quickly and I learned the harsh reality of life, you know, when I should still have been out kind of, you know, trying to meet boys and have a good time and just, you know, socialize. And I was shown the other side of what would be my adult life, you know, and things like that was really, really hard. And I think that did, you know, I had to do it on my own. There was no other option. I didn't have,
yeah,
you know, and I think there's definitely, people ask me all the time, you know, how am I so fearless? And I think the other side of that is I never had parents to seek advice from, because by the time I was old enough, I was on my own. You know, by 21, I was still at uni. I had to get a job. I was renting a place on my own. You know, I didn't have, it was all down to me. So I've never kind of sought that approval because it was never
hmm,
there from, you know, a young adult. So for me, taking action was the only option. And I think that's a massive positive. You know, I think I'd never change my circumstances and what I've been through, and it has made me who I am. But I did learn that if I wanted something to change or I wanted something to happen, if I didn't
yeah.
do it, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen.
And that's massive, that. And I suppose that's something special really inside yourself, because there's a lot of people in that situation who would have went the other way, who would have used it
Yeah.
as an excuse, who would have not created the life for yourself that you've created. Um, how have you worked on that mindset, or is that just something that's been installed where you thought, well, I'm not going to go down there. I'm going to change this. I'm going to, there's only me who can do this, which there's only anybody. You can only ever do it yourself, can't you? So is that something that you've just always had inside of you? Or have you worked on that over the years, or is that?
Well, my dad was super. He was super opinionated and very, very big on morals. So I grew up. He was very strict, but he was very fair. He loved. I've got a twin brother. He loved us more than anything. He had us when he was 42. So to have a boy and a girl in one go, when he thought he wouldn't have children, he was besotted
Yeah,
with us. But he was also very strict. So I grew up in a household where manners were essential. You didn't leave the table, no elbows on the table, you said please and thank you. You didn't get anything for free. We were
yeah,
really, really big. And I think he was older than all of the other dads. So he was almost a generation above. So I got brought up in loyalty, honesty, morals were, that was the only way to live. And also don't ever let anyone stop you from doing something. So he was the chair of governors of our primary school. He was my brother's rugby coach. He came to all of our awards evenings and things like that. So doing your best, and even if you lost, was always the most important thing. It was
yeah,
never an option to not try your best. And if you tried your best and it didn't work, that was okay. But if you didn't, it was never okay. So I was always exposed to the fact that not trying my best was never an option.
yeah,
So yeah, I think I've never had a mindset of let's use this to get away with things. I always used it
yeah.
to get more, and how can I use this to my biggest advantage. So yeah, I think I've always been exposed to that kind of resilience.
Yeah, and it's interesting where I don't meet many people. Quite the entrepreneurial spirit. You've left teaching, you've started your own business, then another business from the back of there. Now you're teaching other people within business. You don't often see that with teachers. Teachers normally go down the school, the university, then
Yeah.
they go back to school, if you like. And that's, I do some work with the local enterprise partnership, the local LEP, where we worked with a number of schools, connecting business to schools. And a lot of that was because teachers didn't understand the real world of work. So from you to go from being a teacher and being ahead and then going into business, how was that kind of transition? How did you find that? Or was that, do you think you were always destined to do what you wanted to do?
Well, for the first 15 months, I still taught. So at full time. So I didn't dive headfirst into anything. I made sure that I knew exactly, what the business was bringing in. I knew it could, exceed my annual salary. I knew that, myself and my husband's lifestyle wouldn't have to change. So I transitioned very sensibly in that sense of, yes, it meant I had to work a lot harder and I had to work a lot of evenings and weekends, but I didn't leave my teaching job until I knew that my business was sustainable and
Yeah,
profitable. So it was, in that sense, I was able to learn things as I went in that first year and really, really kind of find myself in that space without the pressure of because I think that's the other thing. If you go in it too quickly to earn money and to make sales, that that pressure that we put on ourselves can be the reason we don't succeed, because it comes from this real
yeah,
place of like panic. So I think I gave myself the best chance because I still had a great salary. I didn't have to worry. None of those were issues. So I think I used everything I used every day anyway as a teacher, from public speaking, planning,
yeah,
productivity. And I used my personal experiences and I just tried to evolve organically. I didn't put too much pressure on myself to do everything all at once or try and succeed too quickly, because I think that's definitely in the online space something that we're exposed to, and it's not a race. And I think talking about how much we earn and how much we make every month, it sounds great, but at the same time, everybody's, money goals are completely different. And that
yeah,
was the driver for me. It was the lifestyle. I wanted to
yeah,
make sure that my life was where I wanted it to be. And the money was almost a bonus.
yeah,
So, I didn't put too much pressure on myself. I didn't rush things. I didn't race to sell. And I allowed myself to evolve organically, especially for that first year. And I think that made a lot of difference.
and that there's topical, because it's top of one of my Instagram posts going out today of the what not to do when starting a business is never chase the money.
Never.
Money will always be a byproduct if you enjoy what you do. If you enjoy what you do, you have fun, the money will come. And I always say, trust that. Trust the money will come if you enjoy what you do and you focus on why you're actually doing it. If you focus on the money and chase the money, and I have in the past where I've took certain deals where I know deep down it hasn't been right, and I know doing this is going to cause me headache, but the money was too good, so I did it. And I should just trusted me gut, because if you trust your gut and you know that the money's good but it's going to be a headache, just don't do it. Do what you enjoy. And I think that's the biggest thing. Don't ever chase the glamorous lifestyle. And for me, my businesses have always been a lifestyle. If I can provide a good life for me, my children, my family, holidays, and to try and get time. The biggest thing for me is to try and get time, because if you have all of this, and I have in the past, I've grew multi 7-figure business. I had no time. I didn't have a holiday. Well, I did have a holiday, but I spent 14 days of a holiday or 7 days of holiday on work, on emails, thinking about what's going on back at work. And I can honestly say that time in my life taught me so much. On I will never go back to that. I would rather earn significant less money but have more time to actually go to the kids football, and enjoy what I'm watching, rather than thinking, oh god, I've got this email's just come through. And now I spend less time on my phone. Even during lockdown, I set myself a target during lockdown to reduce the screen time I use on my phone, not check my phone, not be on my phone, even though you could easily be on your phone and online, because there's, you're in the house. And I think things like that is the biggest.
Yeah, for sure.
Just interested. So you went from a 6-figure to a set, or you went from where you were to a multi 6-figure, 7-figure business. What was the difference when you did that?
Well, I'm not 7 figures yet. That's why I'm scaling. Just
Okay.
because I don't want people to listen to this, and then I'm
Yeah.
all about making sure that So, So when I made my first 6 figures, it was more hours, because my business model then was kind of more one-to-one. So it was
Yeah.
more time exchanged for money. And then it became, how can I serve and support more people, but not be in a situation where I'm basically just swapping my teaching schedule for business, working 10-hour days. So then it became, how can you be innovative? And it's a thing to think about in all of your businesses. How can you be creative with what you want to implement? So it could be things like a membership.
Yeah.
It could be things like online courses. It could be things like trainings that you run to more than one person, monthly. So I think it was more about then, how can I diversify? How can I create a bigger product suite or a service suite that served more than just one-to-one? How could I be more available for more people at once, rather than individuals over hours at a time? How could I serve more of those people in the same hour? So then it became, how can you become more sensible with your time, but also more innovative with what you create to continue to serve them? I'd say that would be the big shift.
Yeah. What do you think in terms of, how has that been in terms of headaches for you? Have you grown more headaches? Is it, because sometimes I think the bigger businesses get, the more pressure you put on yourself because you're getting a little bit bigger, the more turnover's going. Has that put more headaches on you? Have you found that different to when?
I think it's definitely, there's been a few hard learning curves for sure. And definitely with my anxious past, people don't always treat you as a business because you're a person online. So they would send you messages and, don't, for example, if you had a holiday with Virgin and then something went wrong, you'd send emails, you'd follow the right systems, you'd fill out forms. Whereas when it comes to someone having something to say, they could send you a voice note or a video or just have instant access to you. And I think that they've been some hard lessons, putting in some of those boundaries and making sure that people know that I'm still a person too, like I'm not a robot, and things that you say or the way that you come across can impact me as well. So I think that's been a big thing, expressing the fact that I'm still a human and I'm doing my best. And also delegating, that's been a huge thing for me. So my team are amazing, but delegating more, giving more to them, giving them more power to do things, having more systems, and also being stronger as an individual in knowing that I'm doing my best. I think definitely with, my anxious past, I was such a people pleaser. And I definitely, that definitely came in when I had my first few kind of knocks in business. Whereas now I think, do you know what, I'm doing my best. I'm just a normal person, If something goes wrong, then you have to account for, one, human error, and two, be compassionate like you'd want that done to you.
Yeah.
And luckily, because I deal with people that are aspiring to get to the point that I'm in, they will usually treat me in the same way they would want their clients to treat them. But if that didn't happen, I try and educate people, because a lot of the time it comes from impulse and fear. It doesn't come from, malice. And I just try and educate people on, how do you want to be seen in the industry? What energy do you want to put out? How do you want to behave? How are you going to act? So I try as much as possible to lead by example, but also address the elephants in the room. So if there was ever a problem, let's say I get invoiced, I shared on my stories a few weeks ago, and I said, I had an invoice and I've paid it straight away, because that's how I'd want my clients to treat my business. So I'd love for you to just start using that as reflections. So for all of the knocks that I've had, one of them I turned into a podcast episode, and I shared all of the crappy situations that had happened at the start of 2020. I just thought, now I'm not in that space. I want to help you prevent yourself from getting so consumed by the knocks. But I think it is, the bigger the business becomes, the more challenges for sure, but also the more chance to step up, like the more opportunities I've got, the more exciting things I can do, and the more I can delegate, the more I can grow. So I always just try and think, is my choice. If I wanted to scale it back, I could, but I don't. So then I've got to take the rough with the smooth. I can't. It's like a child. Like you want the cake, you've got to let the parents make it, otherwise you can't eat it. So I'm trying to think like that. Like I can't just have the amazing things and not deal with the challenges.
One thing I'm going to ask on this one, because your brand is you and your name out there. People see you on Instagram and your stories and everything's you. A big thing in the past that I used to take everything to heart. So if someone wrote something on a review on Facebook of
Yeah.
one of my businesses, I used to be like, what's going on here? You know, I felt like it was a personal attack on me. It wasn't. It was the business, and you know, we had nearly 100 staff, and it was the processes and everything like that. It was. I knew it was at the business. I knew it wasn't at me. How do you take that when it is you? If you like, oh, it is your brand. It is you. People know Samantha. People know Sam. And how do you kind
Oh,
of?
yeah, I always do that. That won't ever change. I always take things personally. I think,
Yeah,
and I think, yeah, it's just about being real. It is tough. It's tough
yeah.
being in the online space because,
Have you been trolled at all?
never,
Never. I
no,
was just interested because you know we had you know a few months ago we had Kevin Clifton on from Strictly Come Dance, and he talked about the press and people being trolled, and a few business owners a bit like yourself who said, you know, when they get comments online, and I think they turned their Instagram, you can't actually just reply to a story.
yeah. So
The bottom off.
I did have someone clone my identity and make an account on Instagram to scam people for Bitcoin. Um,
Wow.
but I mean, you know, to be honest with you, I think I'll always take it personally because I'm very emotionally led. But I just learned to bounce back quicker. That would be the biggest change. So I'd still cry or sit and think, oh man, this is just, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. I don't think that
Yeah.
will ever change. That's just in my nature to sort of, you know, second guess myself. But my bounce back ability has got much quicker. So before it might take a day or two of me just a bit wallowing in my self pity, now I'll have a little pity party for maybe an hour tops. And then I think, look, I can either let this beat me or I carry on. Like, what, that is it. That is the choice. I
Yeah.
either just let it beat me down and then I go back and all of this. I haven't come this far to only come this far.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, do you know what? To be honest with you, I'm similar to you. I don't think I could ever stop that feeling, you know, of, oh
I
man,
think it shows you care, doesn't it? It shows you care
yeah,
about what you're
yeah,
doing and what you're trying for people. And I think a lot more. It's easy for now for people to leave a comment on a post or write something on LinkedIn if they disagree, and then you know you find the fury starts bubbling because you think this person's just wrote this on purpose. But then I suppose that's a reaction of the more you get out there, the better you start doing. Then the more you've been seeing, the more that people
yeah.
are going to make that comment as well. So be interested. I thought, has anyone ever trolled you? Has anyone ever made a comment? But I think that's a good thing that you haven't experienced that.
Yeah, no, definitely touch wood. No, I haven't had any of that. No.
So what is it? What made you want to grow to the seven figures then? What is it about the you know, everyone wants that multi-million business. Why is that? Why is it with yourself?
It's hard to explain. It's not even that I want it. I know it's going to happen for me. It's like
Yeah,
an inner knowing. Like I've always had, you know, like I just know. I just know that I'm meant to be bigger than I am, not in terms of like fame or fortune or one or the other, but just in all of that. I just have this kind of voice in my head that's like, this is just the start. I don't know. It's just like this
yeah,
burning in my belly. So it's not even because I want to have like you know, a private jet or a boat, or it's none of that
yeah.
stuff. That doesn't really kind of drive me. It's just more, it's more for my own inner voice. This person inside me is like, Sam, you know, this is just you, this is it, you know, this is going to
Yeah.
happen. So it's more for that, like, and even thinking about it, it excites me as a person, like, you know, as an individual. It's not about how my life would change. It's more just that kind of, oh yes, like this is what that voice is telling.
And will you celebrate that success?
Oh,
Because
sure, I celebrate
uh,
every week.
yeah, see,
Yeah,
that's a big thing for me, and it's a big thing that I've never done. I've you know scaled nearly 4 businesses now to multi seven figures. I've never celebrated once. Never celebrated. We've grew successful property portfolio recently, and you know me business partner, my wife, and me you know me business partner's partner. We always talk about all the things we've achieved, we've never once said, look at this. It's always, we've moved on very quickly and go, right, what else can we achieve here?
David, come on.
Honestly, never. We don't celebrate big
That's your
things and big.
homework.
I know it should be. It really should be.
Dude,
And
we had Prosecco last night just because it was Monday, and I was like, come on. And I had an email, and I was like, oh, this is going to turn into something. So we had Prosecco. Just because.
I love that. I do. I love that. I think
Come on,
that's.
David, what are you doing?
I know. It's a big thing for me where my mindset is always right. Okay, what else can we get out of this? What else can we achieve? And I think because we move on very quickly, it's just one big thing. And I've said this year, one of the things we will celebrate milestones. I mean, obviously we've been locked down for the majority of this year, so it's like now once we get out, we'll do something anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
So yes.
The reason that I do, because I'm so similar in terms of like on to the next. And someone said to me, and I can't remember where they heard it, but I'll let you know when I remember. But they said, if you don't celebrate as you go, when you get there, you won't celebrate either.
Yeah.
So it was like this, and I was like, oh, that's such a good point, like this.
And I learned a lot from a guy. He was my very first podcast guest, actually, a guy called Paul Mort. And
oh my gosh, I know Paul.
Yeah, he's very good. Well, he lives obviously up in the northeast in the sunny part of the world. And a big thing Paul taught me and still teaches me now is I implemented the biggest wins of the week. So I do have a look at reflect the biggest wins of the week, but I don't just look at that from business. I look at that, right, okay, what's me target and what am I going to do for me family, for me fitness, for me business, finance? And he calls it the 5 F's, and that's something that I've introduced. So one thing I introduced is, right, okay, we're gonna do something with just the kids. We're going to celebrate something with just the kids. And I now implement that in all parts of my life, because before it was just I had targets on business, where I wanted to be, what businesses we're going to do, and I didn't think of anything else. I didn't have a target, or I didn't have a ambition for, everything else was just kind of secondary. Where I've moved that into my life, so that's definitely one thing I have learned, and I think that's what a lot of people don't do. They focus so much on the business, they don't focus on the family, on their their marriage, on their things like that, and I think that gets left behind. So that's been a big thing Paul taught me, really, and came from podcasting. So it's I've got podcasting thanks for some things. So the kind of interesting kind of next question is, which I ask everyone: what advice would you give your 16-year-old self or 18-year-old self?
Oh, that was such a tough time in my life. I found that was really, really hard for me. I was so unhappy. Just, obviously with my dad, and then starting uni, and then my mum left. I think I would tell myself 2 things. One, you will be okay. I think that was it was so difficult, and with my twin as well, it was just, honestly, I can't explain how bleak it was. It was just hard, so hard. You're trying to socialize and have friends and go out, you start drinking, and then that makes it worse because then you can't handle your emotions, and you're trying to navigate just normal life, which is hard enough as a teenager. So I think that'd be the first thing. You will be okay. I'm really tell myself that. And the second thing is, you will make something of your life. I think they would be my 2.
And did you not believe that back then? Was that something that was too far out of reach? Where
I knew that I knew I'd make something with my life because I'm just too determined not to. But I didn't believe that I would feel happy as well. I felt like I could always push through and I would be successful and I'd do stuff, but I don't know if I fully believed that this would get better. I think I was thinking, am I always going to have to be the fighter? I did think that I'm not a fighter, but I thought, is this my lot? Am I just always going to have to be that girl that's sticking 2 fingers up and saying, let's keep going? or will there be a time that I get to submit and life is good? So yeah, I believed I could do it, but I always believed I'd have to fight my way to do it.
Yeah. And I think that's, good advice. And I think the biggest quote I always say is like, tough times don't last and
Mm.
tough people do. And it's easy to say to people, look, it won't always be like this. You won't feel like this forever. At the time, you never believe it. But it is true. And, if people have marriage breakdowns, and I think I follow a guy I listen to all these podcasts, a guy called Ed Milet, and he always says,
God, I've met him as well.
yeah, oh, I think he's great. I honestly do think he's great. He's so, his language he uses, and I think it's a mindset thing for people to use that language of where everything happens for us and not to us.
Yeah.
Where a big thing in the Northeast and where I live, it's ex-mining community, ex-shipbuilding. A lot of people have never worked since the pits closed, and deprivation. I think the area of East Durham is one of the most deprived areas in the country. A lot of people think things are done to them. Everything's happening to them, and they'll never get out of it. And it's not. It's just a mindset thing, which will take generations of unemployment. And that's where I started way back when in a training business. We were training people who were unemployed, and it's so, if you can get your mindset right and you have a determination to get out of it, it's so important, mindset, and to be able to get out of it. And I think that's a quote that'll always stick with me, where everything happens for me and not to me, and why is this happening? And I always use that now. Why is this happening to me? What can I get out of this? And you'll always take some positive out of probably some of the darkest times. And I always have. I look back now and think, well, I wouldn't have had this if I didn't do that. And if that never happened to me in this life, I wouldn't be where I am. And my wife's a little bit the opposite. She's like, oh, it was a nightmare that in our lives. I'm like, no, it wasn't really, because I've learned from that and been able to adapt that. So, I think that's powerful.
Yeah.
So what's the kind of vision for the next 5 years then, where you're going? 7 figures, you're going to nail that. You've told me that. Where does that, what's the next kind of strand and strings that are going to happen?
So we, myself and my husband, have just started a business as well. So that's going to kind of kick off in its own direction. He'll be.
What is that business?
We're going into property.
Right. Okay.
Building a property portfolio, so that's exciting.
Yeah,
so he's going to do that. So that will be in the next, by then, that will be his kind of thing, managing and marketing that. I will be doing a lot more public speaking around the world, and I definitely would.
Because you went to LA, didn't you? Is it LA? You went to America. What made you transition over to America? What was that?
I love to travel. Myself and my husband, we go away maybe 8-9 times a year. So I love travel. And when I was at university, I worked for a travel company. I love travel, love being away. And one of my mentors at the time was based in LA. And I was like, let's go. So I went over to LA, spent some time with her, did some business out there. I like being in new places and meeting new people and networking. So, yeah.
How do you find the American market compared to the UK?
I mean, everyone in America has a coach, or is in self-development, or is in, therapy, or has support, which I think is great. They're very, very open with, if they don't know it, they'll get someone that does to help them. Yeah. Whereas I think us in the UK are just a bit more reserved, which again, it's just a nature and a cultural thing. We're a little bit more skeptical and dubious, and Americans a little bit more gung-ho and let's just go for it. So I think, I definitely say it's a very different society. But I'd say the UK is kind of catching up in its own way. There's so many amazing entrepreneurs and public figures and inspirations that are coming out of the UK now, and I think it's just a case of we needed to do it in our own time. So, but yes, it is a different market. They're a little bit more, vivacious out there than the UK, for sure.
Yeah. Do you think people from the UK are more well received over? Because the Americans like the British, don't they? And I think that's always a bit of a leg up. But so, where did you start in terms of trying to go to America? Was it through your coach that you were able to get into the USA?
So we did, myself, my husband, and my brother-in-law and his fiance. We went on a road trip around America.
Yeah.
That was, I did a bit of networking whilst I was there, and I ran an event with my sister-in-law in New York. So we already had, from our followers, so we already had quite a lot of American followers. So we decided to run an event in New York. And then when I went back in LA, I did a lot more networking and like media and stuff. So I kind of just thought, why not? You know,
Yeah. Great.
the idea just, the opportunity just sort of happened, and I'm always one for saying yes and working out later. So yeah, it
Yeah.
just sort of happened really, and I do have quite a strong American following, so it did complement itself quite nicely for the business.
Do you see doing more work across in the States in the coming years?
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to be, yeah, definitely. I'd love to be doing more globally.
Great.
Definitely.
So in terms of coaches, mentors, who's been your mentors through, or who is your mentor, and who are your mentors, and who has been your mentors?
Do you know what? People ask me this all the time. I try to stay away from the online influencer space, because I don't want to overconsume, and I don't want it to influence my sort of creativity. But people that I love, but I choose to dip in and out. I like to kind of be in my own situation and then see. So I love Karen Brady.
Yeah.
Like, love her, but she's like an old school entrepreneur. She's not like,
Yeah, she is.
but
She's tough.
mate, she's who I compare myself to. Like, whenever I have these problems, I think, what would Karen Brady do? She wouldn't be crying over a DM.
No, she wouldn't.
So I've read her books. I absolutely love her. So she's my like idol in that sense. That's the energy and the persona that I really want to bring to the online space. I want to have this fierce but female, I just love her. So Karen Brady is one. I also really love like Richard Branson, Alan Sugar, so the old school people. But then I do like seeing what people like Marie Forleo, I've seen her speak a few times, Gabby Bernstein. I like to see what they're up to and what they're doing and what they're bringing out. I follow a bit of Tony Robbins stuff, the more reflective stuff and documentaries. But I kind of, I sort of, maybe it's the Gemini in me, but I go to people when I need something from them that I know they could offer. Like, I learn from them and then I disappear. So if I was going through a bit of time where I wasn't maybe focusing on my own energy, I might tap into Gabby Bernstein a bit more. If I was really wanting to, so I'm a bit more like that, but people that I love to see online, I mean, there's just so many people, isn't there? That. It's just, there's so many. But I also follow a few magazines, like mental health magazines, entrepreneurial magazines, like Thrive magazine, things like that. And they're really good. I also use that masterclass, the website and the membership thing. I love that. And there's some amazing people on there. So I like to get my inspiration from all business people, not just in the online space, because I think otherwise it can become quite narrow. But I mean, I don't really know if that answered your question, really.
No, that's fine. I think that's key. I think a lot of creators are not consumers, so they're out there creating their own way, and they're not consuming a lot. I don't read a lot of books, not at the minute. I struggle to even sit down, and I always find books past my attention span. I like to kind of think of something, have an idea, then move on. I think a book takes that long time. At the minute, I'm reading Tyson Fury's book. I just love his story from where he came and his mental health battles, and to champion of the world in boxing. I think a story like that where you can follow it, and I love Tyson Fury. But books, people like that, I struggle. I do like Tony Robbins, and I think everyone likes Tony Robbins, has followed some part of Tony Robbins. I think everybody's whole online, whatever, anybody online has consumed some part of Tony Robbins. And I just like the podcast now. I learn a lot from the podcast and meeting interesting people, what they're doing, little tips and advice. So do you have a business coach at the moment, just out of interest?
No, I did, but I've just finished. So now I'm looking more at the mindset side of things. So I'm looking at going into like mindset and high performance. I think that's where I'm at now, because the business stuff, I kind of want to focus more on me and, how I step up as the business grows, because I think that's super important. I want to make sure that my mindset and my energy is kind of where it needs to be for the future rather than where I am right now. So yeah, I'm looking to go more down mindset and performance.
Is there anybody you would looking at the moment to reach out to and help with that on the mindset and performance?
I've got a few people that I'm talking to, but I will let you know when I've made my decision.
Yeah, great, excellent. Final question, which I ask everybody, is if you could have a dinner party, we're at a dinner party, there's us and 3 guests of your choice, who would you choose and why?
Elton John, Martin Luther King, and the Queen.
Queen's a great one. Never had the Queen. No one's ever said the Queen.
Really?
Why Martin?
Elton John is my favourite person of all time.
Yeah,
Martin Luther King, I just think, yeah, amazing. Just, I'd love to be around someone of that sort of that struggle and the triumph and, you know, being able to lead a movement like that. I think that's just so empowering, especially now. Like, we struggle with going live on Facebook. I mean, that just puts it into perspective, really. So
yeah.
I'd love to have a conversation with him. And the Queen, just because, I mean, is there any better monarch? You know, she's the longest standing monarch. She's like unbelievable support for the country. I think she underpins so much of what we stand for as Britain. Yeah. I'd love to be around her.
I'm a real royalist, me. I love the Queen. I love the royal family, and what I love about the Queen as well is the consistency she gives. Every time she delivers a message, she delivers it the same way. It's consistent, you know, it's strong, and I just think they do so much for this country in terms of the royal family and what, you know, even just visitors and what people come to see. I love the royals, so it's the first time we've had the Queen, so that's a one. So, well, excellent. So, if anybody wanted to follow you, catch you, you know, see any of your content, where would they find you at?
The 2 best places would be Instagram and Facebook. If they type my name, they'll find me.
Yeah, excellent, great stuff. Well, thanks very much for that. You've been great. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.